Hello everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp. One of our last videos of the year this will be. Now the other day we did a video where we looked at the high score for each month of our reviews, and this one today is going to be every game that got 90% or higher, because obviously some months you may have a 95, a 94, 93, the next month it might be 88, do you know what I mean? So just to give some games some recognition that may have otherwise not been mentioned.
Absolutely. Sometimes you go from a bountiful lush oasis to a barren desert.
Well, yeah. One way of putting it, I guess.
So what are the games that scored 90% or above? Well, let's find out.
Lovely, let's start with 90% then, and the first of those was Dave the Diver.
Oh, what a cracking game this was. We were just talking about this actually, saying that there's a new DLC that encompasses the Dredge franchise,
yeah.
The Dredge game.
The game, yeah.
And has a whole new story campaign based around Dredge, which is very cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting because obviously, well, I haven't played Dave the Diver, but from what you've said and what I've seen, it's quite light-hearted, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And now we're going Lovecraft, are we?
Yeah, we're going a little Lovecraft.
Yeah.
I will say with Dave, it does have that mystique to it. You'd go into these like ancient underground watery caves and stuff, and you investigate a civilization. So it does have that like serious-y side to it. Serious-y. Wow.
Good word.
Great word. What did that score?
That was the first of our 90%. So sticking with 90% then, the next game is Bomb Rush Cyberfunk.
Ah, another cracker. This one basically was Jet Set Radio 2 without being Jet Set Radio 2.
Yeah.
3 different methods of transport, shall we say. Rollerblades, bin liners. I used to be a bin liner.
What does that mean?
Well, the skateboarders didn't think we were as cool as them.
Right.
So they called us bin liners rather than inliners.
Oh.
It was a very clever play on words.
That's very clever, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? I've got so much admiration for whoever came up with that.
Yeah, honestly. But we could go in the half pipes and they couldn't because they were rubbish.
Yeah.
But then, to be fair, if I go out on a skateboard, I'd probably be dead right now.
Yeah. I owned a skateboard.
Difficult.
But I owned a skateboard.
Oh.
I don't think I ever went on it.
No,
I might
was
have
it
gone
a
on it
Teenage
once.
Mutant Ninja Turtles one?
It wasn't actually. It should have been, but it wasn't. I think I went on it once and then decided that the BMX was the way for me. Went back to what I knew. Stayed there until the mountain bike.
It's a good choice.
But yeah, no, this is, as you say, I mean, it's Jet Set Radio for a new age, isn't it? And it seems like it might have even prompted Sega into revisiting
some action.
That game, yeah, for sure. Next then, one more with 90%, and this is Persona 3 Portable. It's come out right at the start of the year. Fell in a month where there were some very high scores. It was actually beaten by one of its, the other games in this series, actually.
Yeah, so these Persona games, you probably know as much as we do, They're very, very lengthy, long-winded, you might even be fair in saying, JRPGs, but they're also very stylized, and once you're into them, they're incredibly compulsive. They do tend to have some like labyrinth elements that can be a little bit more mundane, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've always favoured the Shin Megami Tensei series over Persona personally, so I've never dabbled in this one as much as others. I think I will change that. I do own 5 on the Switch, so I will get round to playing that at some point. But this was a game that people had wanted to come across to the Switch for a long time, and it ultimately did, and it got 90%.
Sweet.
Moving on to 91% now, and a game that achieved that score was F-099.
Funnily enough, in yesterday's video that was all about, and obviously it's not yesterday for you guys, but it is for us, the addictive games list that went out for Christmas, quite a few people in the comments were saying this was their addictive game for the year.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can see why. It's very clever the way Nintendo take a franchise that's been dormant for so long, bring it back, but bring it back in a way you'd never expect, with this 99 twist to it.
Like an online sleeping giant.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't even know if F-Zero was ever online. It's been so long.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No, but it is now.
It is now, for sure, yeah. And the 99 formula of obviously having that many people in a race at any one time, it's practically flawless, isn't it, as well? The way it runs.
Super smooth, yeah.
Absolutely. And that kind of elimination style where every so often, every lap, 10 people will fall out or whatever it is. It's quite tension-inducing, isn't it,
It is. Take your finger off the accelerator around the corners. That was the lesson I learned.
Yeah, it'll get you far doing that for sure. Another one with 91. So again, this didn't feature in our monthly roundup across the year because it was beaten in 1 month, but that was Vampire Survivors.
Vampire Survivors, yeah, one of the addictive games for the year, and stupidly cheap. It has a base price of like £3.99. This is a classic. It's not an arcade game, but it has that arcade feel in that you can just pick up and play. You don't need to think, you don't need to even know anything really about games, You've got your character, avoid the enemies.
Yeah. It reminds me, I haven't played it, I'll be honest, and I certainly will at some point, because I love the look of it and the idea of it, but it reminds me of things like Robotron or Super Smash TV from back in the day, as you say, arena, top down, kill everything before it kills you.
Super easy to pick up and play, really is. Great game and well worth that 91%.
Nice. The next two, just again to show the value of this list, weren't in our top scores per month because despite getting massively high scores, they were beaten by something else, you know?
Okay.
The first of these is Wargroove 2.
Yes, Wargroove 2. And interestingly, hearing you talk about the
Advance Wars.
Wars game, this has so many similarities to that. And it seems like Wargroove 2 even moved closer to Advance Wars than the first game. So yeah, a turn-based strategy game that has story elements that play out during your battles. Like you might be trying to reach a port or something. I think that happens early on in the game. You can take over buildings, use those to reinforce your troops, head out very much like Advance Wars.
Yeah.
Some of the storylines are brilliant. There's a few different narrative arcs. One of them follows a pirate, and as we always say, anything with pirates in is instantly better.
Yeah.
And it's really good. And the units are slightly more varied than they were in the past. I like the mixture of land and sea. I didn't get to any air units. I'm sure they might be in there at some point.
They're certainly in Advance Wars, so
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they hadn't used that somehow in Wargroove.
But it has a map maker that's very in-depth. You can create your own campaigns. So yeah, they scored a very high 92%.
Yep, and on that same vein, we had Fire Emblem Engage. Now, if I tell you that this came out the same month as Persona 3, so obviously neither of these games were top of that month.
Wow.
So that was a good month, and that was January.
Wow.
And this also got 92, if I didn't say it. This is a great game. You know, really such a good game. Tactical RPG, of course. Classic Fire Emblem in respect of how you have your team that you'll add to as you go along. Sometimes mandatory, but other times you'll need to speak to certain characters to have them join you. You have that permadeath in there if you want it, but you don't have to use it. But you also have the time crystal mechanic where you can rewind if you do lose a unit and try and do something slightly differently. I would say this is my favourite ever Fire Emblem game. For me, this is better than Three Houses, but that's because I think I prefer that classic style a bit more than where they went with that game. But I do love the fact you have now two new releases, slightly different to each other, that cater to so many people, you know? And then we have one that was the top of its month, and that's Star Ocean Second Story R, which got 93%.
I feel like I've spoken about this game a lot
Yeah,
recently.
I know.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's one of those where I've spoken about it so much I can almost not speak about it anymore, but it's a fantastic JRPG from Square, and I don't think anyone expected it to be as good as it is, and I certainly didn't. So if you like things with sci-fi in them, but also the fantasy, this combines both of those elements. A really random comparison is the game Outcast that came out on PC years ago. There's actually a remake of it being made on modern consoles and things, but that did the same. It had that medieval and technology combined.
Yeah, I mean, another series that this reminds me of, because you don't see sci-fi in turn-based RPGs often, do you? It's normally medieval or whatnot. Certainly was back then. But the Phantasy Star games from Sega back on the Master System and the Mega Drive did a bit of that.
Yeah, I never really got it to play any of those, but they were so popular.
Yeah, for sure. Also 93% then, and again winning its month, I think it was October, we had Super Mario Bros. Wonder, another game obviously that we've mentioned a fair bit in this, or throughout our 12 Days of SwitchUp series, but just a return to form for Mario in terms of its 2D platforming. Really showed Nintendo still have the magic when it comes to level design, and it would be lovely to see this being the template or the standard now for any future releases. This game actually ended up taking my highest personal score I'd ever given on the channel, which before this had been Cuphead. Or actually it was tied with another game from this year, and that's the game that we're going to talk about now, and that's Octopath Traveler 2. Another game that I gave 93% to, like I said, my highest score on the channel as of this moment. Now I did play the original Octopath and I enjoyed it. I love the fact that Square Enix had created a brand new franchise or game, singular game as it was back then. I love the new art style they'd gone for, and I'm happy to say that they've taken a lot of what that original game did and improved it in this sequel. First and foremost, I loved the battling system, for me the most important part of any JRPG, and I enjoyed how they treated their characters. I think they did a better job this time of making the story a bit more cohesive. Yeah, funny that after 6 years of the channel existing, I finally beat the highest score I'd ever given, and then equalled that score again within the same year. Let's move on to the next game then, and that's Sea of Stars.
Yeah, I'd expect to see Sea of Stars getting some form of sequel in the not near future, but in the future. It's done so well for its developer and publisher, and rightly so. It looks beautiful, it plays well, and I think you said this was going to be one of the games you were going to maybe play over Christmas time.
I'm going to try to. I do try to play an RPG over Christmas. Last year I couldn't because we had some work going on in the house and it was just manic. But the year before that I finished Bravely Default 2.
Nice.
You know, 65 hours worth. So I'll try and play either this or Eastward is the other one I'd be quite interested in playing.
That's a good
one of those two.
I mean, that's a win-win really. Although Eastward is quite, well, it took me about, I managed to spend 80 hours, but it take you about 30 hours.
Oh, that's not too bad then. Yeah, I can handle that. But yeah, Sea of Stars 94%, right up there in terms of scores for the year. In fact, it was only beaten by one other game. We're not quite there yet though, because another game got 94%, and that was Persona 4 Golden, and that came in that January with Fire Emblem Engage and obviously Persona 3.
Ah, yes, that was. I think that one was written by the mysterious Holden Green.
It was indeed, yes, that's right.
He does his, he absolutely loves his massive RPGs. Huge fan of the series, but also I think he was very fair in his scoring for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the gameplay does hold up very well. There are, I mean, you mentioned the dungeons when talking about Persona 3. I think maybe that is the drawback to some people in terms of these games these days. But if you are on board with that, then it's just more of the same, and it's good stuff, you know. And that leads us on to the highest scoring game of the year. No surprises, I'm sure, but that was, of course, Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, that one scored 96%, so it's really getting up there. It is interesting though, isn't it? Because sometimes when you very first have all the reviews coming out and you've got all these 10 out of 10s dropping all over the shop, and you see a few comments like, oh, this should be 100, this should be full marks. Well, actually, no. And even more no now than at the time, because you have that initial, like, almost like love, you know, that, like, what's it called? When you very first fall in love kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can't see any of the flaws. But then as the months go on, you can see the flaws.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about flaws. It doesn't have to be a flaw. You know, like there was some performance issues in that game, say, for example, some slight ones. It's not even necessarily about that. It's just about the fact that, you know, the mechanics in play were fantastic, and the world to explore was huge. But that's, you know, there are other things you can do in a game sometimes that not every game is going to fulfill for you, you know, and what that does, it does very well, hence the score. You know, 96 is a cracking score. Let's have it right. And this game for me is one I know I will appreciate more in a few years' time. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? When I've got maybe a bit more time, when the kids are a bit older, what have you, or maybe one Christmas. Yeah. Where you just have that time to sit down and appreciate it fully. But from a technical level and in terms of its mechanics and how it built on the first game, that's where the score came from. Because it did so much so well, and it did things that I didn't expect it to do, you know?
I think, I'm sure, as we saw in our Christmas list, you know, the best of the year for the subscribers, 50% of them chose it as their favourite game of the year.
Indeed,
It doesn't surprise us at all that it's made the top of the list. I think it's rightly so. And roll on what comes next. Although, let's be honest, when we look to January, it's not looking like the January we've just had. No, it shows the difference a year can make in a console's life. And will this be the year that a successor enters the fray for the Switch? Or, you know, we'll see, I'm sure. But this has been a good year, hasn't it? And I think this list was important just to emphasise some games that would have been lost otherwise because they didn't top their month. And if they'd have released a month later, they certainly would have done, for example, you know? Yeah, absolutely. Some nice ones on there. Dave the Diver, I'm really pleased to see make this list. Lovely. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's useful for you if you're looking maybe to pick some bits up with some Christmas money or what have you. Hope you enjoyed your Christmas, of course, and looking forward to your new year. And it's nice to have you with us and have had you with us for this whole year. Absolutely, Happy New Year and enjoy yourselves. Thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.